Hi, I'm Madeline Merrick. I'm the executive director of the North Central Louisiana Arts Council, NCLAC, and so glad to have you all on tonight to talk about the Flavors exhibit. Um, it's our first show of the online gallery. It was created with the help of Remax Realty, just to have an outlet, a platform, a place for artists to gather virtually to, either we've kind of kicked it off with, things curated through NCLAC, but we hope to grow it as a space that artists can come up with their own ideas, use it as a, hey, I have this cool idea, but I don't know how to group it together and make it, feel like something outside of myself, which is also, it's always very hard, especially in this digital virtual world that we're in. So we felt like having a space to kind of create this, exhibition would be really needed. So tonight we'll hear from Felicia Burse, the curator of the show. She is a native of North Louisiana, and she received her undergraduate degree from Louisiana Tech University, focused in arts and in psychology. She then got her master's in arts of museum studies from Southern University in New Orleans. And she's completed internships with NCLAC in 2015, and then with Tech Special Collections in 2017 and 18, where she worked to curate the Rites of Passage African exhibition and also the Camp Reston collection. And her artwork herself has been exhibited at the Tech Architecture Student Show, as well as during the Louisiana Peach Festival, where she placed second in the Peach Art Exhibit. So we're very happy to have Felicia on, talking about the name Flavors, just the idea behind it, and then how she worked with all of you artists, the ones that are on, to really round out her idea of what flavors and diversity in North Louisiana really looks like. So I will hand it over to Felicia, and then later we can, of course, do some question answer amongst each other and kind of open it up a little later more organically.
Okay, so good evening. I'm Felicia Burst, and I was the curator for this particular exhibit. I hope y'all are staying warm. I hope y'all are doing your best during this storm that we're having. And so I was approached in August, being a curator of digital exhibits, and ability as to kind of what I wanted to focus on, so diversity. And so I came up with the term diversity and inclusion a lot, but I wanted something that was more actually was more memorable. So when you do an exhibit, you want to have a name that is very memorable. So I started thinking about, well, what about 31 flavors? But then that's like Baskin Robbins. So I don't want to get into any legal situations. So I was like, okay. So I thought about, what about just flavors? And I thought that was pretty short, sweet, and it kind of just encompassed the different ethnicities and languages that you can find in North Central Louisiana. And so as I was working on a project, when I tend to work on curatorial projects, I tend to have a really big idea as to what it is that we can do. It's just that sometimes I have to really accept reality. And the reality is sometimes I can't do everything that I wanted to do. But I wanted to find people that were at least from at least one continent, like each of the continents, with the exception of Antarctica. So I thought about, okay, I want somebody that's of Asian descent. I want somebody that is Latinx, or somebody that's Spanish speaking. I wanted there to be African Americans involved. And so as I was picking people, I was trying to think of, okay, so I have this particular flavor, so to speak, but I'm missing this. And so as I was picking out different people, and as they were submitting their the piece that they wanted, I noticed, okay, this is something that I like the way this is working out. So, for example, let me see if I can find an Pantika's piece. And so, what I like about that one is I like seeing the language incorporate into the exhibit. You know, not just having everything being English, because not everybody speaks English. And it would be good to have like different languages. And so, like, as someone who has studied museum studies, one thing that you do kind of learn about is accessibility. Not everybody speaks English. Not everybody has the funds and the mobility to be able to navigate a museum space, and which is a plus for this digital gallery space because it kind of eliminates some things. So you don't have to really worry about mobility. You don't have to really worry about accessibility as far as like paying money to get into an exhibition. So having a digital space like this does help with accessibility. But what I do like about Antika's piece is seeing the script, how, I can't read it, but there are people that are of that community that her piece is going to really resonate. And so those are some of the things that I really wanted to incorporate into the exhibition. I wanted to make sure that different groups were able to find something that they could relate. Yes, and so I did initially start with North Central Louisiana, but as I was trying to find a different artist, and I didn't want to constantly repeat, I guess, a certain style. And so I knew exactly what I was looking for. And so I got to a point where I had to kind of branch out in order to find what I want. And so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go. And so since I started with Pantika's piece, I'm gonna go ahead and ask her a question. So let me find her question. Okay, so Pantika, this is the question I have for you. I like how you incorporated language into your piece. In what way does the language play a role in your life as an immigrant?
It plays a big role. So, especially when you move to different countries, it can be any country. That's you need to know language. That's the base you start. Like you cannot communicate with people. Like there might be, even though you know the language, you might not understand the accents. And so and also like that's heavily dependent, everything is dependent on language. If you cannot communicate properly, it's very difficult to adjust yourself in new environment, in new country, because you have to learn everything in few days. For example, if you are coming as a student, like when I came, I had a hard time understanding people, but I have to do it. So yeah, it plays a big role.
So in terms of what is the overall message that you want your piece to communicate? So
Uh,
when people see it,
yeah. So it's the first thing is making the people who speaks English, like how, like if they never come across with language barrier, if they haven't been moved out of the country and like came in contact with different language, so they understand visually when they see that work, like how hard it is. And for the people who understands that language, they can read it and they can connect themselves with that, that okay, I had that experience. So it everyone feels at some extent that kind of experience, and we come out of that. So it's kind of positivity bringing among the international peoples.
so I'm going to go ahead and move to Sylvia Schultz because Sylvia has a similar background. So Sylvia, you do dance and theater. How does performance art enhance your life?
How does what now? Performance play a part?
Yes.
Um, yeah, so performance plays a huge part in my life. I've done theater through school and back home in India. I moved here to the United States in 2000. And honestly, my husband encouraged me and said, "Why don't you go for an audition here?" I said, "No, what kind of roles will they have for brown people in theater?" you know, just that kind of thing. But it turned out that my first ever audition in Ruston with Ruston Community Theater, my daughter was cast as Molly for Annie. And it was a buy one, get one free kind of a thing deal, maybe. I don't know. Pardon me, D, if that's not right. But they cast me in the ensemble. Had a great, lovely time. And since then, have never looked back. It's been from 2007. I've done over 12 plays, mostly musicals. I enjoy musicals. And of course, it forms a huge part of my life, my personal life, and everything. And kudos to my husband for supporting me with that. And as for the feature that's on the NCLAC Flavors, the dance item that was performed at Louisiana Tech for India Night. One of the hats I do wear is also a faculty advisor for the Association of Indian Students, and I'm not a dancer. Trust me, that was well rehearsed and all that. But I just believe that art and performance, art has no language barrier, or you can just hear a song and know what they're communicating, or dance and with the gestures and all. But anyway, it does play a big part, and I'm really thankful for that. I hope I
So
answered partly.
yes. Um, so to kind of tie what Kantika has said and what you have said, since we're on the topic of language barriers,
Mhm.
would you agree that I guess art is a good way to bypass or to connect with people despite language barriers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, going back to India Night, our audience was about 200 people, and you don't necessarily follow the language. We did not have subtitles play on the TV or anything like that. Just a brief intro was given of the piece that we were performing, and it ties into the Bollywood or the film industry, and said, well, this is in the 50s and 60s. This is how uh, it's a romantic scenario. The female is communicating her feelings to the lover, and that's universal. I think it doesn't need a language. um, I think that should answer the question, right, Felicia?
That answers the question. I appreciate your response and thank you for educating us about your experiences.
Thank you. We appreciate what all you did for this. Let me just say it
Um,
before I lose my chance.
Thank you. And one thing I do want to mention, as I was curating, I didn't want to focus specifically on young artists. And that's one of the diversity things that I wanted to incorporate, like, artists across like the age spectrum. And so I wanted to make sure that I contacted people that did have, differences in generations. Uh, as a because I think sometimes in the art world, a lot of times the older artists get pushed aside. And so I wanted to make sure that I did incorporate some older artists.
You did. You checked me off for the senior citizen category.
Thank you for your participation. Okay, Drake, I'm gonna go move on to your piece. So your piece, based on my understanding, draws inspiration from the Yoruba god Ogun. So what draws you to African spirituality?
Well, the short answer, if there's a short answer, do you want a short answer?
Whatever answer you would like to give.
I'm going to try to keep it short.
Okay.
There is a prevalence of references to the Yoruba tradition throughout hip hop history, a lot of the early hip hop history in particular. And moving to Louisiana, of course, kind of situated me in a space where you kind of have to have to acknowledge, if not deal with the Yoruba tradition because of the prevalence of African spirituality throughout the state, throughout the American South in particular, and of course, prominently in New Orleans. So a lot of the work that I was doing in grad school was kind of superficially investigating some of the deities associated with the Yoruba tradition and some of the practices and the utilization of language. And once I landed in Louisiana, I thought that of course, being in the classroom as well, it provided a perfect opportunity for me to do so much more straight ahead, serious kind of investigation, right? And to think about the way that, as mentioned earlier, the way that language is utilized and how it can be utilized to bridge gaps. So specifically talking about the way that religious iconography and language is used in hip hop culture, which is extremely simplified in a lot of ways, especially when you talk about the breadth and depth of what spirituality and religion are. But it's used to communicate things to people who may not have any formal training in anthropology or religion, right? And so, in thinking about the prevalence of those ideas, I just wanted to find a way for the work that I was making at that period of time to, provide a jumping off point for some of those same kind of investigations, and also to use the work that I was making at that period when I got to Louisiana as a way to, offer up new methods of communication with students, because I wanted to make students understand that, I wasn't just someone that was standing in front of the classroom, but I was a practicing artist who was interested in a wide variety of things, and that there are things, there are subject matter and histories here in the state of Louisiana that they should be investigating. This a rich part of their history, and that provides opportunities for them to do some sort of personal investigation that can make their work a little bit more rich, right? And so that's the short answer.
Okay. Okay, so you mentioned that there are references to African spirituality in hip hop, especially early hip hop. So can you give examples? Are there certain groups or certain artists?
Well, some of of course, the most well-known is the reference to Islam, but a lot of the groups that reference Islam were also referencing African spirituality. Then, at the very least, you would hear some group mention Oshun or Shango, and around the same time you see some of the same references pop up in some visual art as well. A lot of that is rooted not only in the fact that hip hop, as we understand it, really is something that's rooted in New York, where there's a large presence of African Americans practicing Islam. But there's Marcus Garvey in the Pan African tradition, well that influences a lot of the youth that came up to form the foundation of the hip hop nation as we understand it. So that's where a lot of the roots are. But also you have Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was extremely interested in African traditions. And a lot of the literature that he wound up reading to inform his practice is some of the same literature that hip hop artists, younger hip hop artists during the late 70s and early 80s were reading. And so you see that conversation happening between the quote unquote fine art world and artists operating in popular culture. And all this cross pollination that happens in a way that we don't talk about in a much broader, serious kind of way, because we think of ourselves being siloed in a lot of ways, that artists operating in academia are not interested in or doing the same things that artists that are in underground avenues are doing. When of course we're all pulling from the same well, because we're the same people who live in the same neighborhoods, right? But because of the way that people talk about art in a broader sense, you would think that we're not dealing with the same issues, and in fact we are.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind is Beyonce. So in like her more recent work within the past several years, you have seen references to African spirituality in her work. She just released Black as King. I actually hadn't seen the actual film, but I've seen reviews of it. And as I listen to people who practice African spirituality, they're able to, I guess, decipher some of the different references that are in some of these works. So there are some contemporary mainstream artists that are incorporating that into their work.
Yeah. I think a big part of that, of course, is not simply just because it's a thing at the moment and, the kind of general curiosity, because artists are always looking for something, to reinvigorate themselves, right? And so, you have, these moments where people will latch on to whatever seems to be the newest, hottest thing. But there's always been this I guess, for lack of a better word, an undercurrent of African Americans talking about traditional African practices, even if they didn't necessarily recognize that's what they were doing. Especially when you have people who live and center their lives around New Orleans, but they don't think about the fact that there's a cross pollination between Yoruba tradition, African spirituality as practiced in the Caribbean, and of course in New Orleans. I mean, there's a one-to-one correlation basically. But because of the way that we're educated and the way that we think about the lives of people of African descent in America, we tend to think that all Black folks are Southern Baptists, and that there's no space outside of that. And of course, the reality is that there's a wide variety of Black people that live in Ruston, in Shreveport, in the state of Louisiana, in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, and in the Sea Islands as well, and off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. So I think once people at the very least acknowledge that, then they become a little bit more receptive to the things that they may see and encounter. And you wind up seeing vevés in places that you didn't see them before in New Orleans, right? And you see references to Oshun, Ogun, and Yemaya, right? So there's work that we have to do as individuals, to make sure that we're being open and receptive to what's out there, because there's a lot of stuff right in front of our faces that we tend to kind of overlook sometimes.
Okay, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you for doing this show.
Oh, no problem. I'm going to move on to Philip. Philip, the piece that you submitted is T Vogel 2. Can you explain the title of your piece and how do you as a person relate to the office environment?
Shoot, I did not unmute myself. Okay, so I feel so inadequate explaining this after going after Rodekis, because there's so much depth to his work. Quite simply, is the subject's name. Quite simply, that series, the Office series, is a series of I don't know how many images that I've collected over the years. It started, I think, back in maybe like 2012, 2011. It's rooted in basically just loving portraiture and recognizing in the office that I was in at that time when the series began, that the windows of the office just gave this lovely light. And so if colleagues came in, if students came in to my office, I didn't notice initially, but after a while I noticed that they were just bathed in this beautiful light, and it just kind of clicked that I should be taking portraits of everybody that walks into this office, everyone, no matter how they come in. It always pays off if they're interesting in terms of their look or their attitude or whatever. But I just felt the need to collect as many portraits as possible. And so I've been shooting those again since 2012. I've moved several offices since then. In fact, actually, I've moved twice. And in between the second office I moved to had 0 windows. So I had to stop the series then. And then I moved to another office which had more windows in it. And again, the same situation, beautiful diffuse light, which is very flattering to most people that walk in. So again, there's no rhyme or reason to the name other than it's a simple naming system, just using the subject's name. Now, the second part of your question, you said the office environment. What do I like about that? I guess mostly, I guess it's twofold. One, again, the light that it offers. Two, I have such a textured office, meaning that, like most of you guys that have offices, especially those in academia, you collect things over time. And so I'm constantly bringing things into the office. So that kind of brings us I guess, a different spin to each photo, because if you look closly, in each one, there's going to be something added on the desk or some kind of trinket on the shelf. So it kind of, not only do the individuals change from scene to scene, from photo to photo, but it's kind of a Where's Waldo kind of thing, for lack of better terms, where you never know what's going to be different in the shot. So that's another layer of interest, I guess, to each photo. and it gives me access again to all these different people that I wouldn't typically run into. Again, sometimes I might have, a random student come in and they're just looking interesting today, so I have to shoot them. It might be a colleague, whomever. So it just connects me to all these different people on campus, and so it's almost kind of an easy setup. You just never know who's going to come in, and so it gives me a lot of access to different people.
About your piece, I like how the individual has like the hot pink hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like that contrast with the background. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked a question about the office environment because I work in an office environment. And sometimes offices can be very restricting, kind of like depending on the situation. I work in an environment where there's some windows, but not really to the outside, and how, people relate to office spaces differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate how you're taking an environment that you're in constantly and you've turned it into like a space where people are actually able to take their photographs, have photographs taken of them. So
Yeah, well, I mean,
process is-
yeah, well, I here's the thing. If I've got to be there a lot, which I am in the office quite a bit, being an instructor, I want to make it somewhere that's inviting, some place that I want to be. Despite taking photos, I just wanted to be a place where I want to exist. And then initially, when I moved into the office, there were brown paneled walls, and it was just kind of, quite frankly, a nasty spot. And so I came in and painted the walls white, and again, brought in all this texture from all the different things I've collected over the years. And so I wanted to make a place that's inviting. And I think that does add to it being a decent studio of sorts, photography studio, because people come in and they look around and they have stories about, oh, I had this old camera, my grandma had this camera, or oh, I didn't know you had all this hot type. Some of my background is a graphic design, so I have a lot of graphic design based treatments and stuff. And so it kind of sets the stage and it melts the ice, and it makes it an inviting place to shoot in. So yeah. I didn't have that in the plan to make it comfortable for the people. I wanted to make it for myself, but I found that the byproduct of that is that everybody else that comes into the space feels comfortable. So that's always a good thing.
And I remember in my earlier college days, whenever I had office hours with a professor, I'll just kind of like look around the office because the office is a reflection of them. There's some people that they really put their personality into the office, and it's kind of a home, like a home away from home. And so I think that is a very interesting concept about how we relate to office spaces. And so I appreciate your contribution.
Appreciate you having me in the show.
I was gonna say that too really quick if I can, that
Sure.
like Felicia, you just said, the office is a reflection of Philip, but then I also see the image he created as a reflection of him as an artist, but also as an educator. And like we all, most creatives have these multiple hats where, it's your job, but also you're trying to make art, or you're running a business, or you're doing all these multiple things, and you see that polished photograph at the end, but what about all those hats you had to wear in the meantime to get there? So I resonate with that, or respond to that as also trying to be an art you know administrator, but then also an artist myself, and like which hat do you show when, and how do you still try to like tread water. So I see that office space as kind of that like push and pull between like I really want to be in the studio, but I'm like really happy to be like educating and promoting and lifting up these students at the same time. So
Madeline, I'm glad you said that, because that's also part of it too. Is just constantly wanting to make. When you're a maker, when you're creative, you're always wanting to make. That need is always there. And I even tell my students all the time, how do you become better at whatever you're doing, whether it's photography, graphic design, whatever? Do it all the time. Let it fill this, the extra spaces, within reason, so that you put in your hours. A lot of times, I hate to say it, I know this is being recorded, but let it stay here, because I was taking a portrait, and I'll tell the student, hey, I was shooting someone, but yeah, it's putting in that practice. Putting in that practice is what it's all about, and making as much as possible.
And I totally understand the need to create while working in an artist environment, because I work in a position where it's not artistic at all. And so sometimes I'll just be at my desk and I have all these ideas just going in through my head, but then I have to do my work. And so I'm like doodling on little scraps of paper or little sticky notes. And that artistic mind just keeps going and going and going. And so say it's a struggle that a lot of us have, especially if we're not really working in the field.
Yeah, it's tough.
I'm
You
gonna
just
go.
got to make your time.
That's true. Okay, I'm gonna go on to Katrina. So let me find Katrina. Um, Katrina, I love the colors in your self-portrait. How do you
Thank
use
you.
photography as a vehicle for self-expression? And when did you realize that this medium works for you?
Um, well, I've been a photojournalist for a long time. Um, and of course, photography, it tells stories. You can tell a story with one image or multiple images. So after I got done with photojournalism, like you, I have a constant artistic mindset, constantly popping up with ideas and things I want to do. So that actual dress that I'm wearing, I actually made that. So I will have these spur of the moment ideas to make these dresses or make these things. And then I would say, hey, I need to model this. So that turns into self-portraiture. And as artists, sometimes, I can speak for myself. Sometimes I just want to get it out. I have to get it out or I'll explode. So it takes time to find models. So rather than just go out searching, I became the model in most instances. And it's a creative outlet, it's a major outlet for me. Now I find myself going loopy if I don't sew something, or going off the wall if I don't take pictures of something. And that's so much a part of me, to create and to create and release, and not hold that in. So that is a big part of my existence as an artist. I have to create, I have to reflect the times, I have to share. And a lot of people, sometimes they kind of hold back from sharing, but I have to do it. I'm like, hey, look what I did. Or, so I hope I answered that question. I hope I did.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And so I totally get the whole thing of needing to create, and if you don't, you're gonna feel like you're gonna explode.
Yeah.
And I have actually a project that I started back in 2016. I'm still working on it. And for me, it's like motivation. Part of it is motivation. I'll work on it and I get stuck. And then other things start coming in the way. But I'm like, I gotta finish this. I just have to finish it. And then I'll start oh, I have this idea. I need to work on this painting. So I have all these different unfinished projects. And sometimes it does get hard. Your mind is pulled into different directions.
And you know what's so crazy, Felicia? If I don't finish it, that will make me go even crazier. So if I start it that day, I'm going to finish it the same day. If I wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to make a dress today and I'm going to take pictures in it, in a couple hours, it's going to be done. I don't know why I'm made like that, but that's just, I don't know. What is it, mania?
I don't know. So since you do like to make dresses, are there certain fashion designers that influence you, or are there certain time periods or styles that you really gravitate towards?
I really like classic things that are timeless, that you can wear at any moment in time. I don't have specific designers, but I do like old fashioned classic things. What happens to me is that I will, we're sponges. So I will scroll or I will look at someone else and I will get inspired. And I look at it and I will say, I can make that. Ah, let me do that. Let me tweak it. And I cannot sleep until I do it.
And I think that's how our minds work. We get to a point, we have these ideas, we really want to flush them out, and we tend to absorb a lot of what's going on around us, what's going on internally. A lot of times I focus on like what's going on internally, and I use that as a way of, I guess, like instead of writing a diary entry, creating a piece that reflects a diary entry, sort of. And so, so yeah, like, as artists, we are very much attuned to what is that's going on within us and on the outside. And so I very appreciate your art piece. I like the mood of it. It's kind of a darker mood. You have a very I like the red and different textures that's going on. And so I was very impressed with your piece.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I really do appreciate being a part of this art show. I went to Grambling State, so Dr. Davis, he was my professor, and he ran the art department. And I would always want to apply to have my photography in the gallery, but of course, the artists, the painters, they got first dibs, and I was in mass comm as a photojournalist, so my photography never got a chance to make the walls. So I really appreciate me getting a chance to make the walls, even though it's digital.
Yes, and one of the things that I did want to focus on when I was creating this is that, a lot of times the people that get into these different art shows, there is a certain art community. And, a lot of times the people that get into the art shows are people that are within the same cliques, within the same groups. So I wanted to make sure that I incorporated people that, they may not have as many opportunities to into art because be part of a group, what have you. Okay, so I think that is all the artists. Oh, I see a hand raised. Philip?
No, I was just applauding what you just said. That's all. Giving a chance to everybody to get on the wall. That's all.
Yes. Okay. Did I leave anybody out as far as participating artists?
I'm not sure who Wernet is. I guess it's just their connection. The one with the W. I'm not sure who that is, but if they are an artist.
Yes, the archivist at Northwestern and Natchitoches.
Great. Glad to have you. So you can keep going, Felicia. If you, I guess we're to the part where if we want to open it up for, questions from you guys, if anybody wanted clarification or like, hey, when you said this about that, anything about the artists that are here, it maybe if there's a question about something about an artist who's not, maybe Felicia could answer. But
one thing that I did want to focus on as African American, we had 2 African American musicians that were part of this exhibit. A lot of times when people think of African American music, they don't think of like opera. So that was one of the reasons why I incorporated Brenda, because she sings classical. And so one of the things I wanted to show to the public was, we don't just do like hip hop and R&B and that sort of thing. That we do blues, we do rock, we also do classical.
And Brenda is an amazing artist. She sang at Trinity for the longest for Christmas services, and she's just amazing.
So do any of y'all have any upcoming projects that y'all working on or projects in progress?
I'll say I have, the photo series is always ongoing. And I do have 3 pieces showing in the Masser coming up. I think that's, I think it's like the 59th annual juried show at the Master. And so I have 3 office portraits showing up there. I'm also a woodworker, so I'm always working on different furniture pieces, but that's aside from all the other stuff. Um, what else is going on? That's pretty much it. Just doing a lot of portraits. I do want to ask you, Felicia, how do you
Mhm.
feel about um, flavors, the outcome of everything, and could we expect to have a flavors next year?
Um, I have mixed feelings. I think part of it is that, I have the idea as to what I want it to look like, and then like there's the actual outcome. Part of me is very happy that it's finally done because I started working this in August, and then the hurricane hit, and so I lost momentum. And so, there are periods where, I would gain momentum and I would lose it, and I would gain it and I would lose it. And so it actually turned out better than I thought. Like it's hard to sometimes it's hard to visualize the end product. And but when everything came together and I saw all the colors and all the different flavors and the styles, like I was very impressed with it. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to be able to curate because I have curated projects before, but if you don't exercise the muscle, it does get weaker. And so I'm glad I was able to exercise my curatorial muscle again. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, certainly. And I just want to give you some encouragement because initially when you contacted me about this, I thought that it was just going to be visual art. I had no idea that it would be, singing and dance and all this other stuff. And so there's a, large cornucopia of art here. And I was very impressed with seeing the final gallery, all the different places you pulled from. And I just want to encourage you that I think this was a great outcome. And I'd love to see how it grows. Certainly, we need this more in the area, and so please, be encouraged and push on. And let's see it again next year.
I will say too that she did an amazing job with that losing momentum and getting it back again. I will totally apologize for the way things just would come up and, other projects would come into play with NCLAC. And so she was really, really amazing at keeping us on track and keeping things going and being, motivated by the project. So I hope Nick Lack would love to have you back. I would love to work with you again. So I hope if there was, in the future, a thought to do another, exhibit like this, or if we could pull it into, actual space, I think, something like that could be really great to see.
And as a visual artist, I did heavily gravitate towards the visual artist, but I decided, I wanted some sort of like music to be involved. I wanted there to be theater to be involved. And so that's why I branched out a bit more. A lot of um, exhibits focused specifically on visual art. And so as I was working on this, although this is a virtual platform, I also I was kind of thinking about, okay, if this was like a physical gallery space, what do I imagine? And so that's something that I was taking into consideration. Rodriguez?
Well, you just answered my question, so it's all
Oh.
right. Yeah, I was going to ask you what you think the show would look like were we not, dealing with COVID-19, because this is kind of the same thing that we dealt with the HBCU alumni thing that we did with Shrek and Sussler. Was that we were spitballing and aiming for the sky 2 years ago, and everything was dealing with a bunch of events that would take place in a face-to-face terrestrial world, because that's the way we do things. And all of a sudden you have to rejigger and imagine things for a virtual platform. And so I'm wondering, were there any specific things that you were thinking about doing with the physical traditional exhibition that wound up being curtailed because of COVID? Or did this unfortunate circumstance of COVID-19 make the show more flexible for you?
I think the circumstances made it more flexible. It was challenging how I had to communicate and I couldn't see people. So that was a challenge. But I tried to keep keep the mindset, okay, although we're not in a physical space, I need to curate it as if we were, because it's still an experience. And I always kept the audience in mind. It's like, okay, as an audience member, how would they react to this? What kind of variety I would like for them to see. And so I tried to make sure that I put myself in the audience shoes as I was curating it. This was my first time curating in a digital space. So I'm kind of used to curating with actual objects and telling a story through objects. So that was like a challenge, how would it look like if there were no walls and we still had to curate. So I hope that answers that.
It does.
Sort of. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I have a question from the chat. Ryan Bats wants to generally just ask about, was there anything in curating, Felicia, that you were surprised by, or it says a flavor that you didn't expect? Like, I'm curious, going off of that, your connection with Robert Finley and kind of how he kind of got thrown in the mix.
Yes. So I contacted Jean at the Union Parish Museum. I was looking for somebody from Bernice, well, not specifically Bernice, but from like Union Parish. And she recommended Robert Finley. I never heard of him. And so I did research, and she did mention that he was on America's Got Talent. And so I did my research, and I liked his music. I liked how it's like the rock and blues, and that is like an art form that is like native to this area. You do hear a lot of blues around here. But I did want to make sure that, all the artists were on like an equal playing field, regardless of the accomplishments. And so communicating with him was like very interesting. I also communicate with his daughter. One thing that I did really focus on as I was working on this project is making sure that any video content, we have permission. And so I wanted to use one of his videos, but I had to contact the label, and I contacted the label, and that's sort of got the runaround. I didn't get direct answers until I was told you need to contact Warner Brothers. And so I was going to go through that process, and I realized it was going to take money, and it was going to take time to get the video that I wanted cleared. And we didn't have either of that. And so I did contact Music Makers Foundation, and I asked, can I use permission? Do I have permission to utilize this particular video? And they granted. And so one thing I wanted to very much focus on as I was working on this project is being professional. And so I didn't want to just grab videos, grab content from everywhere and just not have permission, especially this is a public space. So all the videos that are posted, there has been permission granted, and it can be backed up. And so he was a very interesting surprise. Like, any other questions?
Felicia, who is your favorite artist? You don't have to answer that. I'm just messing. I'm not gonna put you on the spot. I'm just messing.
Okay.
Me and her classmate from elementary.
I'll ask.
I did like Camelia's piece. And so I like how she used purple as a way of, so she didn't use like local color as far as skin tone. She used color purple, and that was one thing that I wanted to know about her piece was why does she use purple? Is it her favorite color? Or, so that is a piece that I do like.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate her work too. I love illustrators in general. I grew up reading comics and all that stuff, and so I do appreciate her style quite a bit.
Yeah, were there artists that any of you were like, oh, let me find their website, let me find their Instagram, like let's connect, like I've I've never really there were many artists that I had never seen just, being in the area. Um, but I'm curious if there were any other artists that were like inspired by the show.
Well, I know I'm talking a lot, but Camellia actually, she worked for our office in the mass comm department and our media studies department at Tech. And I remember several times walking into the main office and seeing her doodle, but never stopping to see what she was doing. And then the show comes up, and next thing I know, I see her work, and I was like, oh wow, I had no idea that this was the work. And so this show helped in a way introduce me, although I talked to her many times and seen her doodling, to her work. And I just went down a rabbit hole after that, and I actually ordered a print from her site afterwards. I really appreciate that. And I had to slap myself for not stopping all the hundreds, not hundreds, but dozens of times I passed by and didn't stop and say hi or hey, see, what you're doing. And so after all this COVID stuff is done, I definitely want to sit down and if she's still in the area and kind of pick her brain on her style and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing Miriam's work at one of the Art on 45 deals and being struck by it. There's so much great stuff in that show that we tend to think of our artist friends as just being regular old folks, and we get used to what they do. But there are a lot of opportunities to see people's work in a new light, and I think this show provides one of those opportunities. As Mr. LeBlanc said, hopefully it will become a regular thing that there will be a new interpretation of flavors in 2021 if we survive the snowpocalypse, ice storm, 2021, 2022, I should say, right? That there's going to be something that will further the conversation, because that's what exhibitions are supposed to do, is further the conversation about what art can and should be.
I want to say it really opened my eyes to all the art around us. Just this showcase, I feel very humbled. Nowhere close to, you guys around this table here. I only knew Philip, I think, as a co-theater parent, maybe from his kids being in one of the plays, that kind of thing, and Felicia, of course, from campus. But I actually, checked everybody's profile, like you said, Madeline, and would like to follow. I'm not big on Instagram or anything, but it was very interesting to see everybody's and just the variety that Felicia has collected for this particular show.
Anybody else?
Are there any questions? Closing thoughts?
I can just close it out unless somebody wants to raise their hand and chime in, but I'm so glad that we all got to come on this call, and I hope that this grows into something more and continue the conversation, and whether it leads to another exhibition or just another project or more connections. I hope that does come out of this, and just to get artists, I think the biggest challenge that's been happening is getting artists to it's hard for us individually to come out of our studios and our holes and everything, but especially to engage with each other. That's what the wine and cheese was for, right? But without having that, it's just a lot harder. And I know sometimes these conversations, it's like probably not the very first thing you want to do, like, oh, I gotta it's gonna be awkward or whatever. But even if we're not on physical walls and having that wine and cheese, I love that there's still ways to kind of try to make it work, even with the snow and the masks and the who knows what's next. But yeah,
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't put it on us.
Please don't do that. I can't take it no more.
No more. But no, I just really appreciate everyone coming out and being on the call, and and definitely Felicia for making this happen, and being a great partner with us and organizer. So yeah.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. All right. Well, I'm gonna sign everyone off and hope you all stay warm and hope we can connect again.